Cool. Well, then we can just kind of jump in just to kick
Okay.
things off. Introduce yourself. Give us a little bit of background into you and what led you to being here, being an artist.
Yes. Well, I definitely don't have the typical journey becoming an artist. I loved art since I was a little girl and was surrounded by everything creative and art wise. Like my Meemaw was an artist. I had an uncle that was an interior designer, people in the theater. So I was always surrounded by it and loved it, but I never really saw it as a career.
Hmm.
And I live in Arkansas now, but I'm from Atlanta originally, and then I've moved all over the place. The two other places were Oklahoma City and Dallas. So, really just all over the board. And I
Yeah.
met my husband in Dallas. So, he's from Arkansas, and that's kind of what led us to Arkansas now. I have a 5-month-old baby. So, it's been a little wild recently, but that kind of plays into the role of actually starting the art career. So I'll go back to that. But
Yeah.
my actual education is in audiology. So I'm actually a licensed audiologist, which is like a hearing doctor. So
Cool.
zero has anything to do with art. But I always had that little part of me. Like I loved creating, I loved content creation. And I always told myself I would go back to it. Like I took art classes as a kid and went to art camp, but then when you get to college, you kind of have to have a real moment of like, okay, what am I going to do? And of course, my parents were like, you need to get a job that's going to pay the bills. And it's sad that like the art world kind of gets that rap, but it's not
Hmm.
easy, and it's not cheap. So I told myself once I graduated, I'm going to buy some paint and dust off those paintbrushes and get going. But it took 8 years of school. So I started pretty late,
Yeah.
like when I was 27 and I'm 30, almost 33 now. So not very long in the game. And once I graduated, I just started practicing,
Hmm.
I with oils and acrylics. And I was learning quickly that I wasn't as equipped as I thought I would be, and especially working with oils.
Hmm.
So it was a lot of trial and error for a couple years, doing landscapes, florals. Of course, you don't see that now on my social media. I'm
Hmm.
now more of a Western artist, which is another little curveball. But I really started that last year. So I have been painting since I graduated, since I was 27, but really
Hmm.
things didn't pick up until like a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's been recent. And really, it was just dedication and going and sharing, and it just went from there. So it's been a wild journey.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because, I mean, just off the bat, it sounds
Yeah.
like you definitely had some patience with it. But I mean, I'd
Yes.
love to hear about what the timeline looked like because it sounded like it's kind of just started picking up more recently. And then also,
Hmm.
was there a shift? Was there a click in terms of style? I mean, your work is more Western
Hmm.
now compared to it sounded like
Hmm.
what you were doing before. Can you kind of walk us through just like the timeline of what all of
Yeah.
this looked like and how things started evolving and picking up speed?
Yeah. So, started painting in 2018, just kind of doing fun things and I did share it on Instagram. I was I was big into showing that kind of journey, and it was very uncomfortable. It's
Hmm.
very vulnerable because they're like, okay, this girl, like a lot of people didn't know that I loved painting. So it's kind of like a weird, like, okay, cool. And so of course 2020 rolls around and it was scary for everybody, and especially in the health field. I really didn't think my job was gonna be jeopardized. And it was kind of like a wake moment for me to be like, you need to do this now or you're going to regret it. Like, dive
Hmm.
into it. So I started a website on Squarespace, which was free at the time. I was like, I just need a platform. And a lot of people just start with a platform,
Right.
and of course social media, right? But I wanted a more professional looking way to like
Hmm.
actually sell and show my art and kind of have a portfolio other
Right.
than Instagram. So Instagram, Squarespace, started kind of sharing those things, doing one-off commissions, and I had so much more time during COVID. So I was going into clinic a couple days a week. So I was like, oh, great. I get to like really, practice and show things because it's hard when you're working to be able to do that. And we lived
Right.
in Dallas at the time. So I painted in our apartment, like our living room was covered, and we have a house now and it's still like that. So thank
Same.
you, husband. Yeah, I'm like, Thank you for like, I owe it all to him. He loves it. He's like, sure, I don't care where you paint. And I've ruined some carpets in our last house, so lesson learned. But COVID really gave me that push, and I had the time. And I had a little more fear to be like, oh my gosh, like, what if I get sick and I die tomorrow? I mean, as morbid as it sounds, it's like, oh, I better do it now or it's never going to happen.
Hmm.
And then why wait too? Like, you know what I mean? Like, even if it's
Yeah.
baby steps. So started that, started showing kind of like the abstract work, which was so hard. Like, no one gives abstract the credit that it deserves. I feel like, like, oh,
Right.
that's easy. It's like, no, it's not. It takes practice and it's so
Yeah.
intentional. And so that was hard. I was really a landscape kind of girl, did, florals. I think that's just the basis of art, is that's usually what you start with anyways. So
Right.
um fast forward, I am still painting on the side. Nothing's really clicking. Like, I get likes and things like that. And, people are like, oh, cool, that's great. And, that was like defeating at first. And I was like, okay, maybe this just is not my thing. And what happened was last year, my husband's a triathlon runner, loves the fitness stuff, and he had a
Oh.
big race. Yeah, I'm like, good for you. That's great. Of course, he was like super fit, and then I got pregnant and I got bigger and he got smaller. I was like, this is not fair. I was like, this is not cool. But he had a race, a trail race in Big Bend, Texas, and it's just beautiful. National park, like what people think of Texas that haven't been to Texas, that's what it looks like
Hmm.
cactus. It's stunning. Probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And we stayed at the Willow House, which is like these little casitas, what they called them. And they're just beautifully decorated, very like natural, kind of, inspired by the cactus and the things around the casitas. And I never really have been inspired by trips per se. I would say I'm more inspired by like interior design, but I guess those two things came together. I like saw those casitas and I was like, okay, I'm not seeing any Western art. Of course, that's probably changed now. So hopefully they don't come for me for saying that. But there was nothing there that I saw, or at least I was like thinking to myself, oh, it'd be so pretty to have something like this in this bedroom. Like, the pretty colors, very natural, neutral. And living in Texas, the art you see is Western art, really is beautiful, but it's landscape, horses running, in the field. It doesn't fit in like, maybe a more modern home or even more
Right.
a traditional home, like maybe more ranch style home, things
Hmm.
like that. So I went home and started sketching, and I sketched my first painting, which I do have prints of on my website, which is Ranchers, and it's the three horses, riders on horseback, very neutral, which I used to do like bright abstract, so it's very different from what I used to do.
Yeah.
And the moment I shared it, and it was very hard. I when you have something new and you share it, kind of just have to go for it. And luckily,
Hmm.
like, it just hit, and people were liking it, and it was like, I was like, okay, maybe I got a little something. And I started just slowly sharing it, and stories and all the things, and shared some of my work on TikTok. And then one TikTok went viral, and it
Wow.
just blew up. And so then the followers from that came to Instagram, and it just kind of bridge the two worlds. And it just kept going and kept going. And I kept being more and more vulnerable. And I would think that the pieces that I was like, I like this, but I don't think anyone else would. I shared it. It would get, I mean, you never know what will hit. And you know that. Like,
Exactly.
you truly think it's always the pieces that I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I share it and it's like, boom, great. Or it's the TikToks I spend hours on and then it doesn't hit. I'm like, really? Like, so it's really just that. I mean, I want to say luck. Of course, it's hard work, but I want to say it's probably both, and just being willing to be vulnerable and showing those things. And I was lucky that the Western stuff really blew up at the same time. Like, it
Yeah.
was
Well, I mean,
such,
you're filling a hole in the market where it's
yeah,
it's Western inspired, but it's
yep,
not
in your
needs to
face.
go in my like,
Yeah.
log cabin ranch
Right,
home.
right. And that's like my custom, when I look at the map, I use Spotify now. So I was able to invest in something that I do pay for that has more services, and could invest in more things that helped me. I was able to see the map and it's everywhere. I mean, I even
Hmm.
have New York City, I have people in California, because there's ranches out there, of course, the Midwest, of course, Texas,
Yeah.
all the things. But and it was just one thing after another. It was like Barbie came out, and I had happened literally by chance painted a pink, which is Western Barbie, and I changed it because someone said Western Barbie, and I was like, that's the name, and it just hit at the right times, and it was just such a weird. I don't even know. It was almost like it was all meant to be in a way, and I just acted on it. I was like, okay, I see an opportunity to kind of use Barbie as kind of to get that one motivated because people said, "Oh, that's like Barbie." I'm like, okay, so and it blew up. So
Yeah.
really, like you said, I found a niche. I found like the two worlds, and I just wanted to put them together. And I felt like that was even my life. I grew up in Atlanta. I'm outside the city. I did not ride horses. I did not, but I loved the outdoors. But then I moved to Texas, and I went to OU for school and Oklahoma, and I love those two worlds. But I wanted the two to be able to be together, and a lot of people resonated with that, which I loved. And you want to feel that when you're an artist. So
Definitely.
it's been fun, and I just keep going. They're like, "What are you gonna stop?" I'm like, "I don't know. Just
Yeah.
keep going."
Well, I'm so intrigued by like so many different aspects of your story, but one piece I want to dig into because I feel like we haven't done this in a while on this podcast
Mhm.
is TikTok. So you're saying that, or you said that you went viral on TikTok and that kind of influenced Instagram and back and forth and back
Mhm.
and forth. Can you talk about how you were using each platform at the time and then maybe how you're using it now, if that's evolved at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, those are like the two things. Like I've had a few people reach out that maybe have little businesses. It's not even art, maybe antiquing or even photography, which is art, of course. And even
Hmm.
antiquing is an art. I feel like everything like that is visual, and it's something that's, maybe beautiful to them that they're sharing to others and seeing if they want to buy it. Um, and really utilizing TikTok and Instagram. I did Instagram first, of course, and then TikTok came in. And of course, I'm kind of at that weird age where I'm like, what am I doing on TikTok? But
Hmm.
it's free marketing on both. And what's funny about the TikTok one, and I always say, like, go for it. And it's kind of changed, which is frustrating. You're kind of at the mercy of those two apps. But if you played the game right, it actually works out pretty well. So for TikTok, I wasn't really sharing my processes as much because I'll kind of tell you what's negative about that in a second. But
Yeah.
if you can guess what that means, but
Uh-huh.
I started sharing pictures of even just styled, like that's actually what blew up was I had a little bar cart, and I put my 30 by 40s, put them on there, put them to Grease, like a song from Grease, has
Mhm.
nothing to do with Western, and put little emojis. And then just, I didn't even think anything of it, posted it, and it just picked up. And I think it was just something that visual and quick. And it was something that was different. Like the music wasn't the typical Western, which is what you would expect. Because,
Hmm.
TikTok and Instagram, it's what music you're using, it's, hashtags, like there's so many things. And you really can't predict,
Yeah.
you just kind of have to post and hope. And I think if it's something authentic and something you like I love, like, even you'll see on my reels, I do rap music with my Western art,
Hmm.
so just having those two worlds come together, like, oh, that's a little different. That's a little edgier than, typical country music with Western.
Right.
So I think that's just being a little bit more creative in that way. Um, and then Instagram, I don't have separate accounts. So I share my life and my art. And
Hmm.
it's intentional, it's not intentional at the same time. I truly can't keep up with I try to do TikTok and Instagram. I'm like, we're good. Especially now that I'm a mom, I cannot juggle.
Yeah.
But I think that's been a positive as people see a little bit behind the art of who I am. And I won't ever separate the two really. Because I know personally I like when people I follow that they give a little bit of realness, like
Hmm.
behind the scenes, because then people will want to actually invest in that and be like, want to buy the product or whatever you're selling. So really, for those two, I say people get them no matter what, especially TikTok.
Hmm.
I know that's like a scarier one to be, but it's not as scary. You just got to be consistent and just share what you like, maybe even pick a viral song, like that helps too. Like if there's a song that's viral, use that. um but really it's, my progress videos have changed a little bit. I used to show that a lot, but then I started seeing people copying, so I get
Yeah.
really worried about that. I don't even do it on reels anymore. I might do like quick snapshot videos, but I won't show myself like I used to.
Right.
um So that's kind of the downside, but I mean, you can avoid it, of course.
Right.
So I say artists be careful. But showing the behind the scenes and then also showing styling on TikTok is huge. Images are more popular, at least for me. Um, Videos, usually me, I do a lot of like holding up the paintings and the prints because I do prints and paintings. And
Hmm.
that's really visually striking for people and it shows them how big they are, the detailing. Um, and like you mentioned, it's the two talk to each other. So if someone finds me on TikTok, they'll often go to my Instagram. So you always want to put your Instagram on your TikTok. Like I put it in the bio.
Yeah.
And you get different age groups. So I get the younger on the TikTok and then younger and older on Instagram. So it kind of gets the two worlds together.
Do you think there's any difference in, I mean, obviously age, but do you think there's difference in what the people are buying? Just because people ask me this a lot. Like, do you think more people from TikTok are interested in prints, for example, because they're younger?
Yes,
I
yes.
just think if people are interested in going into TikTok, I like want to give them as much information so they know what to expect.
Yeah. And I think like it's yes and no. I do think a big portion of it is younger. I even see comment being like, oh, her prints are so expensive. I can't afford them yet. And of course, I have reasonings for the pricing, of course. But,
Hmm.
prints are heavier on that end. And of course, Instagram, I get a lot more the designers and um, maybe people that are more they kind of love the original more than the print. So you get a little bit more, but I've had cross, like I've had people that are maybe more like influencers on TikTok that have found me and then jump over to Instagram. So it's like you don't want to pick one or the other, is what I
Right.
always say. You need to do both and share on both. And maybe be a little more raw on TikTok, because that is a little more raw. It's not as curated, which is more fun. Instagram is a
Hmm.
little more curated in my eyes. But I do feel like you do get younger crowds that want something that's a little more affordable. But I've also, like I said, influencers have found me that maybe we did a collab and they can afford, the higher end, or they bring me higher end customers. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick one or the other. I would do both. And I would do reels, I would do TikToks. Like
Yeah. I think
be
that's
vulnerable on
really,
that. Just I don't talk in them really because I just put music and you just post because you just don't know. You really don't know.
yeah,
So I
I think it's
recommend
great
both.
advice. And I mean, I don't know. I like talking about TikTok because I think it's there. I don't do a ton with it, but I like at a minimum right now, just with my time, I'll just
Yeah.
repost like reels
Hmm.
there. And I'm like, I'm still getting good
Hmm.
traction. So it's like, I'll just
Yeah.
do that as a minimum and then you
Yes.
can like build in more.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I love like the few artists I've talked to on here that have really invested in it. It's made such a big impact for their business. So it's,
Oh yeah.
figure out the way that it works for you. But I do think it is a little bit less curated. So I think for artists, if they can like wrap their head around that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of nice
Lose
because you can
let
like
go of the
be more
control.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's like it is very like again a vulnerable place and it's very like scary because you're like, okay, or it's defeating and you can't like let it get to you. Like, oh my God, like I mean, I've had somewhere it gets 0 views. I'm like, how does that even happen?
Yeah.
And it just does. And it could be the time of day. It could, I mean, you really don't know. And so that's why you just got to keep posting. And that's why there's these people that you literally watch their like what they do every day, which love those. I don't know why. Like I love watching people get ready. I'm like, oh, what are they doing? Getting coffee? Cool. Like, but it's consistent, and it's almost like a friend in a way, because you're like, oh, oh, there you go. And it's the same thing with Instagram. It's like even when they're just being consistent with the content and just showing a little bit of rawness, I think it goes a long way. I mean, I think of influencers that I loved, and I loved when they were a little more vulnerable. You don't have to share like your deepest, darkest secrets, but just a little realness, like things that are not as maybe edited and real life. But now that I see them and maybe they're so edited, curated, and like everything's a professional photo, it's kind of harder to relate and people want to relate. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of
Well, and
the
it just
secret
feels
sauce, I
more
think.
unattainable or like out of
Yeah,
touch versus when I see
exactly.
someone who is inspiring but also has that touch of reality. I'm like, I relate
Yeah.
to you versus like I
Yeah.
can't, like I would
Oh
never be
yeah.
like that,
And I think that's what TikTok does. And that's what's cool about seeing some of those videos is people are just so vulnerable that they're like, oh, come with me and I'll do my makeup. And they're like, no makeup and put their makeup on. Like I would never. But it is a place that you can be a little bit different. Like I don't edit
Yeah.
the videos other than just clipping them then down. Like I don't really mess with the lighting. And I don't as much on my reels, but it's just two different places and just two different groups of people and kind of do both. I mean, they're free too, so you can't
Yeah,
argue with that. I'm always like, they're free. At least you're not paying for anything, unless you do like a, promotion post or something or boost.
exactly.
But I just tell people you have to try it.
Yeah. Well, can
Yeah.
we expand out to what is your marketing strategy now as a whole? Like, obviously, we've dug deep into these two, but what else are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you getting the word out about your work beyond social media?
There's kind of a few things, and I think also my background, and I was selling hearing aids, and I that's technically selling in business and private practice, and I was in hearing aid sales before this, so I kind of understood that portion of it, and I love that part. I love creating, and and I've always been that way, even before my art. People would kind of make fun of me because my stories would be so like I would pose things a certain way. And I'm definitely that girl that's like, let's take a above photo of our food. Like, you grab this one. Like, I'm telling people to like move, like, I'm
Yeah.
all that to me, that's fun. And so I've always naturally loved that. And so it's really the best of both worlds because I naturally feel like I gravitate already posting that way. So I think
Hmm.
for marketing wise, again, I always say that TikTok and Instagram are my top. I mean, those are my marketing pieces. But then I was able to invest in influencers. So I feel like that's a marketing portion. So
Hmm.
two people that are very influential I worked with, we did, I painted something for them. It was almost like a switch, which I always was a little worried doing that, especially when you're an
Hmm.
artist. I didn't want it to be, it's kind of uncharted territory. And I was like, God, I hope this works. You kind of just
Yeah.
have to go for it if you can financially do it. Right. So I painted a painting, and then I send it to them, and then they're willing to share it, and talk about it or do a giveaway for a print or things like that. And it's amazing what their group of people, they're like, oh my God, like, yeah, let's start following. And honestly, you think with giveaways you'll lose followers after. I luckily didn't really lose a lot of followers
Yeah.
on the two giveaways that I did, which I was really nervous. I was like, oh gosh, like it's gonna be like a giveaway, like gimmicky, and no, like it's influencers that I love. I respect their content. I mean, you don't want to just do it with anyone, because
Hmm.
it's gonna be a reflection of you. I've learned that too. It's like who you work with is a reflection of you. And so I was very particular, and I don't do it for everyone. Not that I've had everyone reach out, but you just want to be, protect your brand. Um, so that's what I see as marketing is utilizing influencers or people that have a large following, and that those slowly bridge other things. So
Hmm.
another big one was working with a gallery, which was huge for me. I work with the collective in Dallas and worked with them early this year. It was funny. I reached out to them and joined technically, or at least we knew I was working on a new collection with them right when I found out I was pregnant. So it was kind of a whirlwind with that.
Yeah.
Had my first collection early this year, and then I had my next one coming next month, on October 17th. So,
Exciting.
um, yeah, super excited. Just having that little extra tick on the list of just credibility too. And that's a whole nother marketing, right? Like I'm using their platform,
Hmm.
their designers, and it all just like bridges together. And then I started working with Tart by Taylor, and we did a collab where she took my art and put it on coasters and trays, which I would have
Awesome.
never, it took a lot for me to be like, sure, because I just didn't know, and
Right.
again, I loved her content, loved her marketing, because again, it's an extension of me. So I wanted to make sure I loved how she does her things. Because a lot of people confused us. They thought, oh, it's not on your website. I was like, it's on hers. But
Hmm.
um, so that was another way of I can vision marketing because now she has them in stores and people are like, oh, who's the artist? So it's just different ways of getting the art out there and just different platforms. And it's more affordable and
Hmm.
more approachable. So those are kind of
Definitely. And it's
the
creative
long-winded
and
version.
probably more enjoyable. And I think what I love about what you're doing, and I think everyone can kind of have their own creative take on this, is you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket because a lot of people do
Yeah.
that with Instagram, but you're also not putting
Yeah.
all the pressure on you. Like I think when you can
Yes.
leverage influencers, galleries, other partnerships or other people's audiences, you're going to
Mhm.
grow so much faster than even sitting around and waiting for
Yeah.
TikTok or Instagram to take off. And like
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that can obviously work together.
You
And I'm
can't
not
bank on it. Yeah.
exactly. I'm like, don't sit around and do nothing waiting for a partnership,
No,
but
no.
work towards all of these things. And then I'm always like, it's a waterfall. Like one hits and then something
Mm-hmm.
else starts working. And then, but I mean, it also all comes in waves. I feel like too,
Yes.
like
Yes.
retail is cyclical. You
Yes.
never know when
Yes.
you're going to go viral. You never know if the algorithm's going to stop
No.
working. So it's like,
No.
I love that you have, it sounds like for a really long time, diversified and really focused on how all of these things can, you know, balance and play off of each other. So I think that's
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
you're doing really, really well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's also something I learned naturally being in sales in a different way is, I don't keep stock of anything. So my prints, it's only me working. So I do have to delegate a little bit more. And
Mhm.
I love that I can, drop ship or work with someone else to kind of help me,
Yeah.
just because I don't have the time. I used to pack my own prints. And then, because I loved seeing them. And that's actually how I used to share them is I'd be like, oh, look at this one. And it was just becoming too much, especially as I got pregnant. And I'm a little bit of a control freak in that way. So I really had to trust in people that I was working with to make sure that what they do reflects how I would work. And that can be hard too. And you do want to keep it close to the chest. I really kept everything close to the chest and didn't do a lot of collaboration until really this year, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Because you just do want to be careful because it is your brand. But when it comes to delegating and cost too, like that's why like prints, they're printed as order, like as orders come in, I send it to my printmaker, he
Yeah.
packs it, ships it. I don't keep anything stock. um Even my phone cases is kind of a new thing I started, which was kind of out of nowhere. I just shared one day, I was like, I want to make a phone case for myself, and I just shared it on Instagram. And then that's another thing, I'm going to back up. I use Instagram as well and TikTok also to know where I'm going to go next with my art.
Okay.
That's also
Explain.
so if I or I know I'm getting this style, like my newest style is I've been painting on raw canvas, and it
Mhm.
gives this way different effect and just like a watercolor effect almost. And I started dabbling in that, and then people maybe reach out to me and they're like, oh, well, what about this one or how this many horses or this? And I start to kind of like, that's what I think of for my next collection as I kind of go off the last. Okay, what was the most popular and what were people asking for? And so I use it also, if something gets a lot of likes, I'm like, okay, that style was popular. Let's let's like react to that and be like, okay, let's do more of that. Or
Mhm.
maybe I'll make a print of it because I don't make prints of all my originals.
Mhm.
So because I want some of them to be, a little exclusive.
Right.
But then I want people to have the option if they do want a more cost-friendly option. So I use posts in many ways, kind of as my reviews and kind of my next direction. So that's why those two apps are just so important. If they go away, I'll be like, oh my gosh, which they won't. I'm sure the next one will come about, and then I'm gonna have to like relearn how to figure that out. But um, that's another way to like utilize those tools and go, okay, that's hitting. And as an artist, that's hard because you want to create what you love, and I still do, but you still also have to listen to the people that want to buy your art and what do
Right.
they want to see out of you, or what do they hope for at least, which I think is the hardest part too. Is make what you love, but also make what people love,
Yeah.
and
Well, and it's
you
knowing what to listen for. Like, and
exactly,
if they're giving you
exactly,
insights into something that still feels like you, lean into it. You don't need to
yeah.
listen to the random.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had people be like, do you do unicorns? I'm like, definitely not, but thank you. Like, I've had some crazy, like, and you just say, that's not really in my wheelhouse, and so you just have to be true to that. But you have to listen to what people are saying and what people are loving. And I think that has helped my business as well. It's like, and sometimes I'm like, no, like that one's not going to be a print, unfortunately, or, my prints can also be on canvas. So if someone was bummed that they weren't able to get an original, but I do have a print version of it, we can do canvas. So I try to have multiple options for people, and not be so strict in that way. Um, but it's really just a balance. But you want to listen to those people that are following you because they obviously love what you do. But again, like you said, you don't have to like do everything, but definitely utilize that as like, where do I go next and what's hitting and what's not. And then adjust from
Definitely.
there.
Speaking of balance and you managing all these different things, can you talk about what your daily or weekly routine looks like? So how are
Yes.
you balancing child,
Oh,
art,
barely.
business, responding to all these people on all the social media? Like just hearing it, I
Oh,
think people are probably like, wow, that all sounds great. How does she do it
yeah.
all?
Oh, barely. I'm not gonna lie, like right before I finished my last collection with the collective, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But it's that's kind of me. I've kind of naturally always just done too much. So that's personality. And then also, I guess it was a gift with my previous job. I was in clinic and private practice selling hearing aids, working with patients, which gives you no downtime. COVID happened, rethinking my whole life, wanted to keep art in my life and that flexibility. And I needed flexibility, but also money. You can't do, you got to juggle both. I couldn't just jump off and do art without getting paid. And so I learned that balance of working and painting and when I had my last job, which was kind of like medical sales. So I was supporting clinics and helping them with hearing aids. So I had a lot more flexibility. I had control over my schedule. Um, I made a little bit more money, which was a blessing. And I would do a lot of traveling, but I had way more control. So at that time, I would just film a lot of content. Like if I was going to do reels and TikToks, I would take advantage of the weekends, or maybe I had a lunch break and I would just, it's kind of nice because I could just turn off from the business world and then go to art, and it's a relief for me.
Yeah.
And I would video and show prints, and then I would maybe change my outfit, maybe not, kind of like probably what influencers do. They pre-film, but I needed to just have all this content so that I could share it throughout the week while I was traveling.
Yeah.
Because not everyone's on Instagram on Saturdays. They might be in the mornings, but not in the evenings. So I would just group that, take advantage of the time that I did have, and then spread it out. And luckily, I use that same method now because I have to. I'm stay at home. My baby's 5 months, and it's much harder. I have to, like, if I wake up pretty early, try to do a few things maybe in the mornings. I'm a morning kind of person. I'm a
Hmm.
painting kind of person in the morning. I work better in the morning. But since I can't really do that because my husband works during the day, I do a lot of my content on the weekends. And then I'll edit. My baby still contact naps. So I sit there and I'm just like, "Ugh," like, thank God we can do a lot from our phone because we really
Uh-huh.
can. Um, I'll edit videos, I'll do the things, I'll answer emails, I'll put in orders. Um, that's really like my work time is my when he's napping and I can just be on my phone. So it's happening like during the day. And then if I'm able to during lunch, I'll quickly paint. And then the evenings are really big for me whenever my husband gets back home. And then I'm like, okay, I can paint for like an hour and then give myself a break because you do go a little crazy. And I've had
Right.
to really I don't do as many commissions right now just because it's a whole different side of the business. To
Right.
me, it's a lot more work just because it is, I want it to be more personal. It's a lot more pressure on me because I'm trying to
Right.
create something for someone else, and that's hard. So I did dial that back a little bit. And I think that's why I did invest and was more open in doing Tart by Taylor, leaning more on my prints, things that I physically didn't need to do, but I could work from my phone. I could do those things. So I utilized that. And it's like my day job, and I switched it with being a mom, which is a little more stressful.
Hmm.
Um, but really I just work on both. And of course, like having my husband has been helpful. You just have to have a team when it comes to that. But I feel like if you really, really love it, you're going to keep going. And I just could never get rid of this part of myself.
Hmm.
I won't, and even if Western goes away, which I don't think it ever will, but if things change, I mean, if you're passionate about it, you'll figure it out. You got just gotta fit it in. And that's really what I do. If I have a lot of time, get as much content and then just spread it out.
Yeah.
And just be really smart in that way.
Well, and I love hearing that too, honestly, because I think I don't know, I'm maybe speaking for myself a few years ago, but I think people listening can relate. It's like I feel like it's so often we see these people and or we hear this podcast and we're like, "Oh, well she probably has all this time and she's doing this, but is a full-time artist or whatever." And so I think it's just refreshing to hear like you're doing it on your phone while he
Yeah.
naps, or,
Yeah.
you're doing it at night or on the weekends. Cause I think we all are a little bit like
Yeah.
no one is like, has this perfect, or at least not no one,
It's
but a
not
lot of us don't
glamorous.
have these
Yeah.
like perfect
Yeah, it looks glamorous.
nine to
It is a
five,
lot of
like,
work. Yes.
yeah. And so I just love, I love when people open up and share that and are
Yeah.
honest, because it's one, I'm going to look at your post differently and be like, when
Yeah.
did she film that?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
And
nice to hear, and you're
yeah.
doing a great job. But I think it's
Oh,
just
thank
smart that
you.
you're like, I'm going to lean into prints. I'm going to lean into things that take a little bit of this pressure off me in this
Yes.
time when I don't have as much time to devote to
Yeah.
certain things. So I think that's really
Definitely.
smart.
Definitely. And that's, even dialing back on commissions. And then once the collective reached out and they're like, let's do another one, I was like, okay, great. And they're so good about giving me creative freedom. And because that was even a
Mhm.
risk at the time, that was my argument when I reached out to them. I was like, hey, like, I know we don't have any Western art. And I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in just Western art gallery, which doesn't mean I wouldn't work with one, but again, I
Right.
wanted to expand myself and I didn't want to fit in everyone's box. And that was
Mhm.
another thing that was scary is I'm not someone who owns horses and rides horses and has all this experience. And luckily, everyone's been really nice about it. And they're like, well, she doesn't do, luckily it's just because I think it's authentic. And, I try to stay true to the things I like. And
Mhm.
people will come, you don't, if you try to do the things that everyone else likes, it's not going to work. That was always what I figured out. I'm like, if I just keep doing what I like, be a little more vulnerable, hopefully, hopefully it works. Because
Yeah.
it's a scary place for sure.
Yeah. Can you expand on just some other challenges you faced? I feel like you've touched on a few, but just what have been some things that have been challenging for you throughout this process?
Oh gosh. I mean, luckily business has come a little bit more naturally, and I know that that falls on a lot of things. Commissions are tough. That was something that was scary for me. Again, I don't have so much experience in that, and that's like
Hmm.
you're trying to anyone who's a creative, and whether it's someone who's creating a logo for you or whatever, it's almost like you have to have your brain inside their brain, and hopefully they trust you to make something that they love. And so I had to really learn those things. And then business wise, um not having the art background, or at least maybe not being an assistant or an intern for another artist, where you learn so much about like the ins and outs of those things, like whether it's how you structure your business behind the scenes, how do you get the emails and filter through, and what are the forms you use, like what do you freaking do? And I really just had to learn as I went, which is like kind of what you do anyways with a lot of things. But that's definitely a challenge. You're almost like imposter in a way because you're like, okay, let me create this form of like commission, how do what percentage do I do here? And there's so a lot
Right.
of that stuff that you don't, I'm sure maybe some artists don't even learn. I know when I was in school, they teach you how to diagnose hearing loss and put hearing aids on people, but they don't teach you how to sell them, or they don't
Right.
teach you how to build a private practice. And you're like, what the heck? And so you kind of have to learn as you go. And so you might be an amazing audiologist and amazing with patients, but if you're not selling hearing aids, you're not going to have a business. Because the
Hmm.
art's the same way. If you're not selling things, you're not going to be able to buy your supplies. And it just, so it's a lot of pressure. And going into, I guess it's kind of ignorance is bliss in a way too. I'm maybe not bound by certain things, or maybe I wasn't jaded in a certain way. Or and I try to stay pretty focused on things and not be too influenced by the outside world. But I do think that's some of the challenges, is just not having some of that art background and having that experience, and knowing how to work on that part of things, and really just um, kind of getting over the hump of, I mean, I've had probably every other person in this world when things don't go the way you were hoping, and letting that get in the way. I mean, even recently, like I told you, I literally told my husband, I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it wasn't art. It wasn't even a customer. It wasn't anyone. It was just like so much.
Right.
And I was working on wallpaper at the time, and because I love wallpaper, and
Hmm.
someone had reached out and they're like, you should make wallpaper. And so I'm like, wheels were turning.
Hmm.
And that one didn't really work out. I invested a lot and was very vulnerable in that. And unfortunately, it just didn't, I didn't get the money back that I was hoping for, in sales, or, the partnership wasn't what I hoped for. And that can happen. And you just got to know when to go, like dip out and just be like, we're good. So
Right.
there are certain things that I made decisions wise that you just have to learn from, and hopefully you pull back quick enough that it doesn't, it doesn't sink you, or at least it doesn't get to you mentally. So those are really my big ones that I look back on that I'm like, oof, maybe I wish I had this, or I wish I wouldn't have done that. But I mean, if you don't do it, then you never know. And you don't learn from it. So those are probably my biggest challenges that I've faced,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah,
can
those
think of.
all make a lot of sense. What have been some successes on the flip side? What have been some
Yeah.
really exciting moments up to this point?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was even just so fun to be like, I'm leaving the corporate world and I'm gonna do something I dreamt of, but never ever thought it would happen. My
Yeah.
parents now to this day, they're like, we wish we would have just put you in school for this. Like, and I was like, well, you didn't know. And I think it would have been totally different if I didn't have the background I did. I mean, I could afford to invest in it at the time. Paints are not cheap, canvas is not cheap. And so it was a blessing in that way. So I don't think I would change it, but having the guts to completely dive into it was a big deal. And that was a big success for me. And even just the little successes, like I've had just little things. I mean, even just the collaborations that we talked about, that's
Yeah.
huge. That's a compliment to me. That makes me feel like, okay, I'm doing this. Like this is awesome. The collective was huge, feeling respected as an artist. That's what everyone wants to feel. And being valued, because I don't have the typical background. And not that there aren't other self-taught artists out there, but it's a very vulnerable place to be.
Mhm.
And so and little things like even today, even before we got on here, Veronica Beard opened a store in Austin. I had reached
Mhm.
out for an original a while back, and they ended up just getting a bunch of prints because that's kind of how they decorate. They have these really pretty prints and paintings throughout their stores, and they just sent the pictures to me today of the prints in their new store in Austin, and it's
Oh
just
my
like,
gosh.
what? Like, so those little things, you're just like, oh my God. And it doesn't ever feel real. And one just gets better after the other. And even just like the phone cases going by, like, 30 people buying or 5 people. I'm like, oh my gosh, you like this? Like, what a compliment.
Yeah.
And so it's just all those little things have built up. But every partnership I've been a part of has been a big moment for me. And of course, getting more followers is always nice and it's a validation, but it's kind of like money. It's like the more you get, you're like, okay, the next one, it just
Right.
keeps moving, right? But just those little things are so big to me. And even people sending me pictures of my art in their house, or I've had people be like, oh, this is so meaningful to me and it spoke to me, or I want these 3 horses to represent my kids. And there's been so many cool things. Like I did my newest one, which will actually be part of the collective, is I bought these vintage horseshoes and I sewed them into the canvas and painted over them and then
Cool.
stamped like the big ones because they're super heavy, but these really old ones I could sew them in. Someone reached out to me and they're like, we had to put my horse down and we have his horseshoes and we would love to do something that in memory of. And I was like, oh my God, that is such a cool thing. So like
I
just
love
being able,
that.
I know, I was like, oh,
I saw that.
yes,
I think you posted on your Instagram too. It's really cool.
yes. Okay, that was one that I was super scared to share. Every time you do a new style, you're like, okay, fingers crossed, but just share it. That's why I tell people just do it.
I
You
mean,
never
I'm
know.
shocked that you were scared because I
Yeah,
love it. Like, I'm
thank
like,
you.
why would she not share that?
Thank
So
you. I know. I
cool.
was like, it's so different. I wrote on it. I don't usually write words on my paintings and stuff. But that one was just so cool. So just like those little things, just you're like, all right, all the hours that I work, all the things I do, it's truly a blessing. And so it's just great. You just got to remember that stuff. It's hard when you're in business and people do reach out and they want to like, do this you have to. I've had to really just not do too many things. You put a lot of eggs in my basket, but not too many that it breaks. You know what I mean? It's just
Hmm.
it's such a balance, and it's just intuition. It really is. But yeah, I love all those things. All those
Yeah.
things are achievements for me.
Huge achievements. What do you see next? What are you working on? Are you letting the chips fall where they may?
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I roll. Maybe that's why I'm not disappointed because I'm like, I guess I have goals of just truly balance. Everyone wants that work-life balance, and I probably will never have it, but I've never been one to write down goals. I don't want to
Mhm.
ever disappoint myself in that way, but Yeah, I really just want to see where it goes. I do have, of course, with Tart by Taylor, we plan to kind of keep working together and doing things together for the future. Collectives coming up. I think I'll stay with them. I don't really see myself going with other galleries just because it is financially a lot of more money on my end. You know how it works with
Mhm.
galleries, and but I love having those two things. And I have big works coming with some interior designers, which has been amazing, like ones that I really respect. And that's another huge compliment. And the big one I'm working on right now, it's 7 feet long, 5 feet tall.
Oh,
Is a painting for a designer in Dallas. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot, I'm just so pumped about it. So those are kind of what's coming up right now. In the future, we're just going to see where they go. I would love
yeah.
to do something with wallpaper. I have things in my head, but it is such an investment and it's such, um, I want to invest more time and money in that and just how to design it and pattern and things. It's such a different animal. So, but
Right.
again, I don't want to do too much.
Yeah. Well, and you have time, you have
Yeah,
time to kind of
right.
let some of these other things continue to grow.
Yeah,
So you have
yeah,
more time and money to
yeah,
invest in it to do it
yeah,
again or right or whatever.
exactly. And if you do too much, it's anything. You're not going to be able to do everything 100%. And if you do too many things, things are going to fall through the crack. And I can't have that happen. Even though
Yeah.
things do, it happens. But I try really hard to not do too much. You got to learn to know to say no, or hey, we're going to have to wait, whether it's commissions or a collab of some sort. I just another one. I don't ever plan to really do wholesaling. But I did work with White's Mercantile in Nashville,
Yeah.
which is such an awesome place. They work with Tart by Taylor and actually carry some of our collaboration pieces. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
No, that's all awesome. Well, this is all exciting. I'm excited to see what you do next. I love
Thank
to
you.
conclude every episode with just a lesson or a tip or something, an app, something that's really benefited you as an artist
Mhm.
that's really gotten you to where you are that you can share with our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I tell I would say this to anyone and anyone that wants to share anything that they love and that they might have as a hobby. Share it. Don't be scared to do it. Take a risk, calculated, of course, um, because you don't want to regret not ever trying it. Whether it's, I don't know, making a product of some sort or trying something new that's completely out of left field. Like all of us work so hard, whether you're in corporate job, on your corporate job, but then they might not have any hobbies or any other things. Like just do it and don't like be vulnerable, especially when it comes to business. And really, I mean, Instagram, TikTok are my big ones with that. That's a must have and use both of them. Um, and be authentic as much as possible because people see it and feel it. And I think that's what makes people really successful, at least. And that's what I love when I see people in business or people on Instagram. Just give them a little bit of rawness. And I think people will follow. And if they don't follow, they don't follow. Like people will love it too. And that's good. They'll be your little community. So I just believe that people should do the things that they love and go for it. Like
Yeah,
risk,
I
take a
completely
risk.
agree.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so beneficial, so helpful. Can you share how everyone can learn more about you, follow you, shop from you, all of your
Sure.
different accounts?
Yes, I make it easy with my social medias. They
Mhm.
both have the same handle.
Yep.
It's Emma_Katherine with two I's. And then my website is where you can buy. There's some originals still available. And then prints can be ordered and phone cases. That's emmacatherineart.com. And then the Collective Art Gallery in Dallas will have new pieces, originals only, October 17th. And there'll be 10 pieces with that one. So those are kind of the two areas that you can go to find me, find my art. You'll see my baby, you'll see my house. I share all kinds of things on my Instagram. So those are the places you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This was so fun. I love your work, and I'm sure
Oh,
everyone that's listening that doesn't already follow you will tune in and love it as well.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.